magtrabaho muna sa Pilipinas bago payagang mag-abroad. Yan naman ang sinusulong ng isang mambabatas para sa mga bagong doktor at nurse. Pero ang ilang grupo ng health workers pumalag.
Ayaw naman po namin talagang lumabas ng bansa. Napipilitan lang, napupush yung iba kasi nga, it's a question of survival.
Nalaman po namin sa Department of Health na meron palang 7 billion pesos na plantilla position na hindi nilalagyan ng mga doktor o nurses.
Sa ngayon pa lang mayroon na mga sign and symptoms na lumalabas na malapit na mag-collapse yung ating healthcare system marami nang umalis sa bansa, madalang understaffing. Sana bigyan na ng antibiotic ng mga health workers para ang antibiotic niya yung pagtaas ng sahod, bigyan ng security of tenure para hindi na natin maramdaman yung totally na pag-collapse ng ating healthcare system.
With this law or with this bill, ang mangyayari po, igagaranti po na meron silang sweldo, may posisyon po sila, meron po silang benepisyo.
Filipino healthcare workers are still leaving for greener pastures abroad. Now, the health department is exploring options to keep them here, where the Philippine healthcare system could face a crisis. Will mandating a one-year service for new doctors and nurses help? Let's discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama ko po sa studio si Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief po ng Philippine Star, and Lucy Cruz Valdez, Head of News 5. Nandito kami lahat sa Mandaluyong. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Anong balita?
Hindi na global emergency ang COVID,
Oo
pero
nga.
ang daming nagko-COVID.
Oo
Ito pala, diba, sa paligid
both
natin.
cases and positivity rate.
Oo,
diba?
yes.
At pati yung ICU beds, tumataas yung
So you don't...
occupancy.
So, ano ibig
Exactly.
sabihin ng WHO?
Yun nga ang gusto nating malaman, what exactly.
No, I think what they
nung
said-
dineclare nila yan, March 20, 2020 eh. Hindi rin
Dineclare nila
maintindihan
yung
ng
alin?
mga tao. It's
Na-
the COVID is a
Global-
public health
Yes, yes.
emergency. Hindi rin maintindihan ng mga tao.
Oo.
We had to wait until i-declare na pandemic siya. Actually.
Right.
Hindi siya
Right.
pala March 20, February.
Oo.
February siya dineclare.
Oo. So ngayon, nilift na yun. Hindi pa rin
Hindi pa
natin
rin
alam kung
maintindihan
ano
kung
yun.
ano.
Hindi, pero ang explanation nila has to do with protocols and, di ba, na parang, I think they're saying in effect that all the protocols and all the lockdowns that had to be imposed before, according to their standards of COVID severity, lahat yon lifted na.
It's the highest alert daw ng World Health Organization actually.
So,
But we don't
kasi
even
nga
know
nag-lockdown eh. I
Ayan na nga.
mean, they were locking down
Pero
the
ano
whole
yun?
countries,
Wala bang
diba?
step down yun? Parang either or lang yan. Either it's an emergency or not? Or
Hindi,
is there a
meron
step
silang
down?
gradual,
baka
diba?
gradations of it.
Kaya sabi nila, hindi daw sila naintindihan ng mga gobyerno nung dineclare nila. Kasi sinisisi sila, ang tagal-tagal daw nila mag-declare ng pandemic.
That's right.
Sabi
Oo.
niya, iyan na nga
Tapos-
yung highest alert namin.
Oo, yeah. Tapos tayo naman ngayon, we have that, and yet we're so confused more than ever, diba? Kasi nga parang, so ano ba, magka-quarantine pa ba ang mga
Masking.
nagko-COVID?
Basic masking.
Exactly, diba?
Mamasking pa ba tayo?
So yan ang pag-uusapan ngayon.
Anyway, bukod sa mga yan, di ba, parang we're also, not coincidentally, also marking the first year of, well, since the elections, not necessarily of this government, but
10
we're
months
taking stock.
actually.
We're also using that as a lens over these next few days to
Yes.
talk about the situation. One of the things that we, of course, are talking about is sinong magiging health secretary.
Correct.
Kung hindi pa natin kilala.
May mga haka-haka na actually.
Hindi pa nga.
Hindi, baka kilala natin, hindi pa lang na
Iba yun.
or nandyan na, di ba? In fairness to the people na nandyan na. But we will be taking on all of these things and we begin our conversation with our guest this evening. After a quick break, the Chiefs will be right back.
And joining us now is Malasakit at Bayanihan Party List Representative Anthony Rolando Goles Jr. Good evening po and welcome to the Chiefs. Good evening.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. God bless po sa inyo.
You know, the last time I think I interviewed you officially was when you were still spokesperson for the DOH, right? For
Spokesperson.
President Gloria Arroyo,
Yeah.
in fact, right?
Yes.
And even then, you were already a doctor by
Yes, ma'am.
profession.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
remember
I
this.
specifically remember the time when you interviewed me. Nagpaanak po ako
After
sa
you gave, yes.
Nagpaanak po ako sa eroplano from London to Manila. Nakapaanak ako sa eroplano tapos nag-headline tapos in-interview
So,
po.
is there a doctor on the plane? Like, ganong situation?
Actually, 3 po kami noon.
Yung mother, anong trabaho?
Filipina, underage, ruptured bag of water, less than 7 months old. So it's very complicated. Dahil ang experience ko sa barrio, as a barrio doctor, yun po ang nakasave sa nanay at saka sa bata po. Kasi wala naman na gamit. Pero during that time, syempre yung lakas na loob, confidence. Nandun po.
So, yun na, wala na tayong pag-uusapan.
Ay, ito
Everything's
pala.
downhill.
Teka lang,
Everything's downhill from there. Di ba? After saving.
Teka, since you were a doctor for the barrios at one time, no? And ngayon, ang proposal is for this 1-year mandatory service for all graduates of the medical courses and professions, no? What do you think about that before I ask you the plum question, which is, you know, whether you're going to be the next DOH chief? Kaya na diniretso ko na.
Well, first of all po, I was writing that bill based from my experience. I wanted to become a plastic surgeon during that time after graduation, after I took my board exams.
Mas mayaman ka sana.
Pero okay lang because nalaman ko na
Plastic
hindi pa.
surgery pa.
Pero mas mayaman po ako sa experience sa pagtutulong po. Ang nangyari po noon, nung umalis po ako, pumunta ako ng baryo, nakita ko po na ang laki problema talaga sa healthcare sa ating bansa, especially sa mga rural areas.
Where were you specifically? Just to
I went to Negros Island and then I went to the ARMM. I was all alone during that time.
Pinakamahihirap yun ang region.
Yes, yes. So, ang pinakamahirap po, after you take or pass the board exams, ang mga doktor po, hindi alam kung anong gagawin. Gusto nilang pumasok sa ospital para mag-training, pero wala pang kumukuha sa kanila. Hindi pa nila alam kung anong training ang gagamitin o gagawin nila. So, ito po, ang nangyari po sa atin, sabi ko, bakit hindi natin, right after graduation, pagkakuha ng board exams, ilagay kaagad sila sa isang programa ng gobyerno kung saan i-occupy nila ang isang plantilla position in government. When you list down all the plantilla position for doctors, baka mas marami pa yan na bakante kaysa sa available doctors na pumapasa every year. Every year, 4,000 lang po ang doctors na pumapasa. So, at 4,000, you get to put them on plantilla positions, may sweldo na kaagad, may benefits kaagad. Tapos, i-coordinate natin yan with a lot of universities so that the universities, while they're serving for 1 year, can give them a masteral degree for public.
Credit, no?
May credit siya.
Yes.
And then, ang pinaka-importante po para sa akin, yung nakita ko at na-experience ko while I'm in the barrios, yung para sa bayan spirit. Yan po yung nagbigay sa akin ng tatag, yan po nagbigay sa akin ng confidence na humarap sa kahit na anong problema. Kasi wala naman, hindi naman kumpleto doon eh. Gagamitin mo lang tiyaga, panalangin, at saka kung ano yung natutunan mo sa med school. With this po, baka mabawasan ang pagkukulang natin sa doktor. Mayroon tayong kulang na 100,000 doctors now and 300,000 nurses as we speak. And every time we delay this, a lot of these health workers go out kasi hindi natin sila pwedeng mahabol. So I hope that with this mandatory 1-year service na susweldohan naman sila, wag ko kayo matatakot kasi mas maganda pa yan kaysa sa wala kayong sweldo. You get to be employed right away.
But that's the case for doctors, not
Yes.
for nurses. I mean, the demand for nurses abroad, especially now because of COVID, has become so high, and so there's no lack of jobs for our nurses, particularly abroad. Paano naman yung mga yon?
Ma'am, when we talk about the problem of doctors, we will make sure sa Congress pag-uusapan namin rin ang mga nurses. Kasi nga, 100,000 lang ang kulang na doktor, 300,000 ang nurses. Meron 7 billion na plantilla item worth, pesos yan, 7 billion pesos, na hindi ginagastos ng DOH. Nalaman namin 3 days ago.
Kasi,
Kasi hindi filled up yung
Hindi filled up yung
positions.
position.
Pero ang problema kasi, we actually, yung sinasabi ng nursing organizations we have enough nurses. Ayaw lang nila magtrabaho.
Yeah.
Kasi sobrang liit daw ng sweldo, especially in the private sector.
Yeah. Para sa akin naman po, ma'am, at least itong 1 year na ito, you get to stay. You get to experience. Ang pinakamasakit po sa lahat, ang mga nurses, ang daming nagrereklamo sa amin, yung nurses pa ang nagbabayad sa ospital.
Yes, exactly.
Para mabigyan sila ng training. Hindi pwede yun. Yan talaga dapat yung hindi payagan. But when you are under this program, you will occupy a government position, a government post, may corresponding salary, may corresponding benefits. Overtime, may kasama rin dyan. Tapos, ang sabi ko nga gaya ng sinabi ng ating Pangulo, na dapat whole of government approach, our housing agency must also come in. Make them part of their priority list sa bibigyan ng housing. Yung dapat malapit sa ospital.
benefit na yun, ano?
That's correct. Can you imagine, if you are a nurse, you live 3 hours away from that hospital, pagod ka na Di ba? So, all these things,
Totoo ba yun? Nangyayari ba yun? 3 hours? Sobra naman yan.
ma'am, if you live in Fairview,
Dito,
you live in Fairview,
NCR yan.
punta ka magtrabaho sa NCR.
Traffic time yan,
Diba?
oo,
That's
traffic kasi.
Yes.
Okay, let me go to that, yung sa 3 hours.
Yes.
Oh, this is real life story. There are 1,400 hospitals in the country, according to statistics, 2019. And 1,400 hospitals, 43% of them are government hospitals. And these hospitals normally are located centrally in the CBD, in the urban areas. Okay. So ibig sabihin, yung mga tao sa Sierra Madre, yung mga napuntahan ko, let's say sa Sitangkay, sa Sibutu, hindi nyo na po siguro alam yung mga lugar na malalayo sa atin. More often than not, walang ospital doon. And it would take them hours and days before they can travel to the nearest hospital. When you take the statistics, pag titignan nyo statistika, ang isa sa pinakamalaking rason bakit gumagastos sa healthcare is transportation. Out of that 43% the government na nasa central pa, 6% are specialty hospitals. Yan na yung mga heart center, lung center, and 6% of which are placed centrally. So if you are in Sierra Madre,
So the whole premise for encouraging doctors to the barrios, no? And the whole premise for the Doctors to the Barrios program, the whole premise for that, which was not started, but was really expressed in the 1990s, the 1980s, that has not changed. That X% of our population literally spend the rest of their lives still not having seen a doctor.
but when you talk to DOH, recently I spoke to them, what is the ratio, hospital bed to population ratio? They will say, the standard of DOH is 1:1,000. One hospital bed equals 1,000 population. And I asked them, what is your target? We're reaching 8 to 9 or 0.8 to 9. Wow, when you look at it, wow, malapit na.
That's just the numbers.
Di ba? Pero let me ask you, is that the same in all nooks and corners of the country? In Masbate, what is the ratio of hospital bed to population? It's 0.02. In NCR, it's 2.47. It's more than the standard. But to the extreme, we have provinces and areas that are even less than 5,
Okay.
0.5.
Okay, now-
So ibig sabihin po, dapat pag gumagawa kayo ng ospital, bilang regulator ng pumapayag kung saan ka ilalagay, dapat wag yung payagan yung may katabi ng ospital. Doon kayo maglagay sa walang ospital. Because that policy will drive where the health professionals will be going.
Yeah.
Diba? We cannot blame
the
doctors.
need and even the urgency is very, very clear. But I guess yung question lang is the approach. I mean, going back to the original question, you lay down a very compelling argument na this is compelling. We have the incentive here. Wala ka namang trabaho, wala ka namang sweldo. We provide but once you have that incentive system in place, do you leave it to essentially market forces to say na, look, you can have this job if you want it or not, or do we mandate or do we require our new doctors and new nurses to serve for a particular number of years?
At least with the mandatory rural health service, we can help this country on a year-to-year basis on those 4,000 doctors. We have continued supply of 4,000 doctors who will not leave the country immediately. Because after the 1 year, another 4,000 will step in. Can you imagine if we are able to run down the numbers for nurses? If we, let's say, for example, have 20,000 plantilla positions available for newly grads, then we have additional 20,000
Yes, but
in the
those
workforce.
4,000 are taking the incentive.
That's
They are not
assuming
they're
Yes.
not being identified.
Yes.
They're not being drafted into this service.
No, if it's mandatory,
mandatory.
It's mandatory.
drafted
It's
yun.
mandatory.
Okay.
I would want to make it mandatory.
Yeah.
Why? Because the practice of medicine is not a right. It's a privilege. And that is the reason why we have PRC licenses, because you have to pass all these criteria so that you can be privileged to practice. If it's a right, then everybody from abroad can practice here, which we don't usually do that. Diba? So my sense of when I was doing this, when I was writing it down, I was telling myself, if the bleeding of or the exodus of the nurses and doctors will not be stopped, then it can be a national security threat to this country.
Linawin ko lang, your proposal, it's doctors to the barrio. Saan sila magsaserve? In the hospitals?
Rural.
Parang medyo konti yung 1,400.
Well, that's
And
co-
you mentioned that dapat nagse-set up ng mga facilities in
Areas.
poorly served
Yeah.
areas. Pero if you're going to tell that to the private sector, siyempre sasabihin din nila, it's very expensive to run a hospital and they have to be viable. Kung konting-konti yung tao doon, kaya nandito sila lahat.
That's correct. If you try to dissect the healthcare system in a fragmented manner, you will end up thinking that way. But if you try to collate all the healthcare system, its determinants, kailangan dugtong-dugtong yan eh. At the lace that would bind the beads together would be the universal healthcare law. Okay? There is money, health finance, in health. The problem is, if we have the money now, in the central government, central office in Manila, let's say, for example, somebody in barangay X is sick, of municipality Y, of province Z, how can PhilHealth assure that they're paying the correct person?
Oh, yun na nga eh.
So, kung fragmented yan, mauubos lang ang pera ng PhilHealth. And this is the reason why we have to tie them together, unify everybody, teach each and every local chief executive about this direction that we are taking, get network of healthcare facilities and healthcare professionals. There is money, and let money flow in.
You've said that twice. I just still want to say it, to clarify that and make it explicit. First statement, may pera. Our health system vis-a-vis our entire population, we have enough to take care of ourselves.
Well, I'm not saying we're starting from zero. There is money, and the government can still invest if they see health leadership in the system. If they truly believe that there is a path to take, a direction, somebody who can lead it, then why not?
So your idea is government-driven. It's not private
So public
sector-driven.
hospitals.
It's a whole of society approach.
Kasi yung universal healthcare, it doesn't have enough funds. That's why it's being rolled out over 5 years.
That's why it's a whole of society approach. I'll give you an example po. We need to have a doctor in all communities in the remotest area in our country. Yung doctor na yan, private. Kasi kung public ka, wala masyadong incentive na pumunta doon eh. Pero kung private ka, okay, pupunta ka doon. And then sasabihin ng private doctor, newly grad, 27 years old, newly grad, sasabihin niya, I want to practice, let's say, in Palawan, in the remotest area in Palawan. But I am just a newly grad. I don't have money to start with.
Yes.
If DBP or the banking institutions would lend a doctor, set up a clinic, okay, with a terms
Minimum
that
lang.
is the terms that is very, very,
Very friendly.
friendly. And then here comes PhilHealth. Sabihin ng PhilHealth, o sige, because of our consulta package, we will give you 550 pesos per person that you treat. You treat 100 patients in a month, siguro nabayaran mo na yung utang mo eh. That's 50,000 pesos already. Sa consulta package pa lang. So, the private, the doctor, the government, the PhilHealth is paying, and another member of the society, which is a banking institution, helping together, solving the 100 health problems of 100 people.
So is this part of your proposal, this kind of setup, this whole of everything approach?
Yes, actually, pag inisip mo talaga yung problem of healthcare natin, my proposal for mandatory rural health service is just one piece of the puzzle. But if you want to check the entire pieces of the puzzle to create one program for this government, for this country, marami po yan. And what I just mentioned is part of it.
When you were a younger doctor,
Yes, sir.
and you were with the Doctors of the Barrios program, would it have taken anything away from you, from your personal decision, if it were made mandatory?
You know, sir, I did not even enter any Doctors to the Barrio program. I was just there on my own.
You just went.
My parents were crying, why would I do this? I
You
don't
went
know.
to the barrio on your
I
own.
really don't know. I even entered the Armed Forces of the Philippines. I was drafted as a major. And that was the reason why I went to Mindanao with a stethoscope and with battle fatigue, battle dress uniform, something like that. I would do it again.
Yeah.
And
But would it have taken anything away from you personally?
I thought in the beginning, yes. So that was the reason why I went to Manila. But coming back to Manila, I cried. Because even if I'm saying in my mind, I need to go back for my profession as a doctor, private physician, I was thinking about who will take care of them. So instead of practicing again to a hospital, I went to the Department of Health as the pinaka-midget in the Department
Okay,
of Health.
doctors to the barrios, general practitioners. But the truth of the matter is when we're talking about the spread of hospitals across the country, we can't just have doctors in tiny little clinics servicing what primary disorders or illnesses. We need an entire hospital set up for people to come to, especially in the remotest. And I think that's what we're talking about. And I know that most students who take up medicine will want to practice in a hospital with state-of-the-art, equipment in order to really bring about, let's just say serious healing for serious disorders and not just, your usual measles for kids and so on and so forth, not to denigrate. But are we talking that way, or are we just talking about doctors to the barrios to service basic illnesses or healthcare needs of people? As Robbie has said, this has gone on for decades now, and we have not moved forward since. How do we move it to real, honest-to-goodness healthcare system with hospital systems that will service, all, if possible, urban centers across the archipelago, not just Cebu and NCR?
We need networking. Healthcare system networking. Okay? We need to network or tie up the primary to secondary to tertiary and to specialized. Kung hindi na kaya ng primary, i-refer sa secondary, paakyat ng ganyan. Ang nangyayari kasi ngayon, simple na papanganak, normal, spontaneous delivery, on the third child, dadalhin sa tertiary. Yun ang nakikita natin ngayon. Pero pwede yan sa primary. It eats up. Okay? So, what happens now is somebody in the DOH go to the medical schools around the country, tell them, hey, the profession in the practice of medicine does not only lead you to specialized medicine. Meron pa rin public health. Meron pang family medicine. And if you go to public health or family medicine, ito yan. kinikita ng isang doktor pag ikaw ay espesyalista ito. Pero yung example ko sa inyo kanina, yung treating patient at 500 pesos per konsulta, can you imagine if you are in that municipality and you have 10 of those clinics? Kasi sa isang araw mo, pwede ka mag-50 eh. And then move to the next, and then move to the next. And then in 7 days time, you have 350 times 50. You'll be earning more than the specialist, di ba? So we are putting sense or in financial matters in doctors now. You're opening up ideas.
I imagine you've had this conversation direct with new doctors. And so, what do they say? I mean, it sounds so simple.
And that is the reason why a lot of doctors now are getting into masteral degrees for business administration. You check the statistics. After they graduate medicine, they go to their training. After that, they graduate as an MBA student.
Really?
Yeah, I teach in AIM before. And,
Yeah, but that wasn't the point, di ba? Parang your whole point of trying to sell them on this math is that, go to the barrio, di ba?
But they
practice your profession.
but they can be managers of those healthcare system. Getting their classmates in and putting them in those kinds of network.
Management is great, but at the end of the day, you still want boots on the ground. You know what? That
to treat
doctor,
people.
Di ba? Parang, where does it fall apart? Because it sounds
But they
very-
don't. But
Yeah.
they don't cease to be doctors.
Oh,
yeah, that's correct,
It's
that's
just that they're going to have now a resource that they can probably use
because if-
to set up a hospital
No,
system.
point is,
hopefully,
where
no?
is the
But-
gap? Why is somebody not just saying, wow, oo nga no, I never thought of it that way. Sige, punta ako bukas.
Kasi nga hindi na
Yeah, but that's something we need to explore. And so, this conversation is getting warmer. So just stay there. We just need to take a short break. We will continue this conversation after that. Keep it here on the Chiefs.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Chiefs. Still with us, Representative Anthony Rolando Goles Jr. We are also joined via Zoom by Dr. Maria Minerva Calimag of the Faculty of Medicine and Surgery of the University of Santo Tomas. Dr. Calimag is also the president of the Philippine Medical Association. Good evening, doctors.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Estudyante niyo daw po itong guest namin sa studio, doctor. But anyway,
I've been teaching for the last 37 years.
Ah, wow. Well, he has a proposal now that will affect you. He is proposing mandatory 1-year residency for medical school graduates. And ano pong masasabi ninyo being a professor of medicine?
Actually, we have a paradigm shift now. While before the focus is on curative and rehabilitative. I think Honorable Dr. Representative Goles already said it, no? That now we are focusing more on public health. We want to do the preventive and promotive side of medicine. And in that case, they will have to practice community-based practice. So I think that is already now being done, except that it is not yet put into law.
Doctor, there's another proposal in Congress which was mentioned to us by the former Health Secretary Garin. She wants the medical course to be shortened, yung pre-med daw, to make it 2 years. You are a professor of medicine. What do you think of this proposal?
Actually, at the UST Faculty of Medicine and Surgery, we have a shortened course already. So, because this is cognizant of the fact that we have already the K-12. So, if we include all the number of years, until graduation, that will be 8 plus 2, that will be 10. Diba? Nadagdagan pa yung 8 taon na magiging 10. Whereas all the general Gen Ed subjects or general education subjects are already being taken up in the K-12 or the senior high school. So, if it will be mandated by law, then I guess there should be no problem with that. Other countries, for example, the other ASEAN countries, they have the MBBS or the Masters in Biology and Masters in Surgery, I think. And that is also equivalent to just 7 years. UP system has intermed. So that is also 7 years.
So would you say this is a general sentiment in the Philippine Medical Association? Your views?
I guess so. I think even the Commission on Higher Education is looking into an alternative curriculum, an innovative curriculum that will also shorten the medical profession, medical education, I mean. The CHIEFS is really looking into that as well, seriously looking into that.
Okay, so all told, we are looking at a shortened medical course of 6 years, if I'm not mistaken, no? If we take it from the intermed of UP. And then at the same time, if we give them a mandatory 1 year of service after graduation, are we producing good doctors that way? Is this a holistic way to educate our doctors or to even, in effect, get them to be patriotistic and serve the country, and hopefully even for a longer term than just to fulfill the mandate of 1 year and then go abroad afterwards? What are we creating here, really?
Well, first of all, I took the longest route. I took the 5-year course in my pre-med, physical therapy.
Hindi ka naman bumagsak.
Hindi naman.
So,
5 years
5
talaga,
years
5
ka
years
na ng
talaga.
PT,
Oo,
tapos nag-medicine ka
pa,
na
and then,
4 years.
so,
Oo.
But if a doctor wants to be a doctor, kahit na ano pa kadami ilagay mo dyan taon, titiisin niya yan at magiging doktor yan. Pero pag pinilit ng mga magulang, pinilit lang siya at walang hilig, lagyan mo lang ng YouTube dyan sa harapan na yan, give up na sila.
Or pera lang ang gusto niya.
Can I have a twist on that? Diba? If a Filipino wants to work abroad, he will find a way to work abroad.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So it's the drive for it.
It's a drive for it, but at least before you leave, we're not saying you cannot leave, but before you leave, let us show you the entire Philippines. So that maybe your drive in working hard in abroad can make you come back and help the Philippines when you have all the resources already. Diba? So,
But what's the real disincentive or even barrier, for that matter, from somebody graduating and then just going abroad?
kasi marami akala nila na walang sweldo, walang plantilla, position, and all these things. Akala nila talagang involuntary servitude. Pero kung babasahin nila talaga yung real intent and purpose of the bill that I filed, hindi po yun. May sweldo po kayo, may incentive po kayo, may benepisyo kayo, and then at least may 1 year experience kayo na pag mag-abroad kayo, pwede nyo sabihin, I served in the government of the Philippines as a medical specialist under the Department of Health. Wow.
You have to give it a different nomenclature, because for the longest time, it was called doctors to the barrios. And to me, when you say doctors to the barrios, it conjures images of chickens and eggs being given as payment for clinical services. And so I can't fault young people who want to get into the medical profession and who are now being told that there's this proposal that might in effect lock them in for 1 more year
Hindi naman po ganyan yan. Everybody would need a training. I'll give you an example. Lumipad ang aeroplano, may nanganak, very critical ang pasyente. Yung katulad ng experience
What happened to you?
Ang katabi ko ang governor ng Negros noong panahon na yon. Ang sabi niya, paano mo nagawa yan? Sabi ko, Gov, di ba sa probinsya nyo, I deliver 50 babies a day? So nakapikit ako, kaya namin yan. So that gives you the confidence when you go out to the barrios. As a matter of fact, pag, ito po yung mga biruan namin ng mga doktor doon sa mga rural areas. Malayo pa lang ang pasyente, nagbibiruan na kami. O isang bote na soft drink, ang sakit niyan, may appendicitis yan. No? Ako sasabihin, hindi, may UTI lang yan. Because the way they walk, the way they makikita mo because of your clinical eye.
It's huge,
So,
sharper.
yes, it makes your clinical eye very, very sharper because of your practice in the barrios. And these things, I want to share that to everybody. The joy of what I did before, I want to share that to all the budding doctors out there. Huwag ko kayo matakot. Masaya ho ang magsilbi sa ating bansa po. Yun lang yung masasabi.
But is it a question of communicating that rather because sabi nyo, kung basahin nyo yung proposal namin, I can guarantee you 90% will not read that. Diba? Parang that's really Dr. Kalimag, I wanted to bring you in. I mean, in reality, pagkakausap nyo yung mga estudyante nyo, the future of healthcare in our country, pagkakausap nyo ngayon yung mga estudyante, I mean, how do you communicate this? And in reality, what is the emotional and practical barriers to convincing the next generation of our public health workers?
Iba-iba kasi ang motivation to enter medicine. Matutuwa kayo dahil na yung mga doctors sa barrios. So they sometimes trek 2 to 3 hours sa bundok or they cross yung mga lakes, no? Nakalubog ang mga paa sa tubig. So, iba-ibang motivation ng mga tao for taking up medicine. So, importante talaga yung sabi nga kanina ni Representative Goles. Kapag ka pinilit sa kanya ng mga magulang, no, ang chances are, pagbibigyan lang nila. Pero, at the end of the day, baka hahanap din sila ng ibang gagawin. Pero yung mga talagang motivated, kahit na ganong kahaba no? Yung mag-undergo sila. Kung isu-shorten natin yung course, perhaps, tapos mag-internship sila, and then kukuha sila ng board exams, and then perhaps yung, siguro we have a better term than mandatory service kasi sometimes people are, ano sila, yung pag sinabi mong mandatory, medyo negative agad ang dating. So perhaps we can change the headline to something less, na parang persado lahat, no? But I think we will teach them really the essence of what a physician should be. Alam nyo kami, specialist, anesthesiologist, I've gone to the provinces, I've done medical missions for the longest time. My husband, 32 years before he died, no? In fact, he was on medical mission sa Undoy when he died. So talagang meron talagang kahit na mga specialists na nga, meron dyan mga plastic surgeons, they go on mission, di ba? Yung mga Philippine Band of Mercy, kahit walang bayad. Okay yan, okay lang yan. Ang tawag namin dyan, pambayad sa purgatorio. Kasi talagang, tingin namin, kailangan siya.
Actually,
Pero
iba kasi ang reality ng mga doktor talaga
Pero doctor, hindi lahat ganyan kasi. And we're talking about a younger generation. Marami silang model ngayon na nakikita nila, yung mga
TikTok
doktor,
na nga
mga doktor sa abroad, ang laki-laki ng kinikita, mas maganda yung mga benefits. So kung sakaling matuloy itong mandatory residency na to or whatever it ends up being called, ang tanong ngayon how can we keep the doctors from continuing their service dito sa mga hard-to-reach areas? Kaya ba natin yun?
Actually, kanina nga sabi nga Dr. Kalimag, actually that's the first step. Make everybody react to this so that it can be talked about. Yeah. The second step, since everybody's already talking about this and they understand that it is not involuntary servitude, that it's good for them and for the country, then maybe we can change the name.
Oo nga, yun nga sinasabi ko, baguhin ang pangalan to the barrios.
At least, everybody would agree that this is the right path, this is the right direction.
Why aren't local governments, I'm not saying that I know I'm stating it as a fact, but can local governments do more on their own initiative? I mean, local governments, I imagine, can, for example, compete for
That's
these
correct.
graduates. Diba? Parang we may be a 6th-class municipality, but punta kayo dito, I can give you a house, I
That's
can
correct.
even give you a plot of land. Diba? Parang, can
Yeah.
local governments have their own initiative and creativity to come into play here as well?
Incentives.
Especially given that it's devolved.
Of course, they can do that. But the converse is also correct.
Which is,
After 3 years,
ayun na nga eh.
if after elections, these local chief executives would lose an election, then everything starts from scratch again.
Isn't there a way to tie these doctors at least to
Universal healthcare law.
How do you go
How do you
about
do that?
Just
ensuring
implement.
sustainability of
Okay.
yeah?
I'll give you a history. In 2012, as a principal author of the amended PhilHealth law, okay, that was the start in preparing our country for universal healthcare. So in 2012, when PhilHealth law was revitalized, in 2019, universal healthcare came. In 2019, all the way up to now, guidelines were already set for local government units on how they will follow and implement it. Okay? May guidelines na po yan. Ang question natin ngayon is this: nasaan na tayo? Ini-implement pa ba yan hanggang ngayon? Or baka naman piling-pili lang ng lugar ang implementation, hindi yung buo. Kasi may naririnig ako sandbox. May naririnig ako trial. The law was not made because it is going to be tried. The law was made to be implemented.
Did the pandemic throw a monkey wrench on it somehow? Kasi
Somehow,
3 years din.
you know,
Yeah.
because everything stopped during pandemic, yes, you may be right. But after the pandemic, with the exodus of the healthcare workers, I don't know if we have enough still to implement the universal healthcare law.
Wala nga
Wow.
daw pondo
Yun
even
na nga.
before the pandemic. That's what the health department told
I'll give you an example. Routine immunization, measles, and
Yeah.
all these immunization for children. During the 2-year pandemic, around 6 million or 2 to 6 million children were not able to get this routine immunization. Polio vaccines, measles vaccines, all these vaccines.
DPT, mga
So,
ganyan.
ibig sabihin, 2 million children are now prone to get these diseases once again, which we don't even see at all na in the Philippines. So now we need to catch up in these routine vaccines. Ang problema, meron bang magtuturok pa sa kanila?
O yun rin. Dr. Kalimag, kung sakasakaling matuloy yung mandatory residency, what do you think should be yung mga priorities that should be implemented para to turn the program into a success? And yun na nga, yung sinabi ko kanina, to hold on to the doctors, no? To keep them from leaving as soon as the mandatory residency is finished.
Ang lagi natin kasing naririnig is of course yung plantilla, positions. Alam niyo mas marami nga ang mga doctors sa government ngayon in training because of the higher salaries in residency training sa government rather than residency training in the private. So if siguro competitive yung kanilang rates, I think they will agree to serve. Kasi like for example, nung pandemic, may mga residency training sa government na nag-extend. Gusto pa nga ng mga residente, kasi sabi nila may sweldo pa kami. So, meron, may gano'n. Na-extend sila sa government, for example.
A quick question lang pala. We've been talking about, well, not only doctors, but by and large, we've been talking about doctors to the barrios, incentivizing them. The math and the models that you've been discussing, does it apply to nurses? I mean, can you make the same? Because when you say to a doctor, punta ka dun sa barrio, 550 per patient per day, you do the math, within 1 month, kumikita ka more than 100,000. What's the pitch to nurses?
Well, first of all, when you talk about primary healthcare, hindi lang naman yan yung clinic ng doktor eh. May nurse rin siya. So, susweldohan din siya. Meron pang laboratory. Hindi lang naman nurses yan. May mga laboratory technicians pa. Etc. No? Hindi lang laboratory, pero may pharmacy pa. So, may pharmacist yan. So, We should not, ito nga sinasabi ko, hindi lang po doktor at saka nurses ang iniisip po natin. This is a good start to talk about it. The need, the lack. Gusto natin abutin hanggang dulo, sino pa ba yung dapat mabigyan
Okay,
ng
but
pansin?
taking the entire ecosystem, is there enough in that rural pie to provide an incentive for everybody in the ecosystem?
Hindi, maaaring hindi lahat, kaya inuna ko yung doctors. Kasi hindi ko alam kung ang graduates ng nursing ngayon is steadily on the 50,000. Hindi ko alam kung ano ngayon yung 32,000. So we have to, in our first committee hearing, we will ask the local government, the DBM, etc., to give us a rundown of how many plantilla positions are nurses.
32 in government. In the private sector, they're saying as low as 8,000 a month.
No, I'm saying
Then yung
nurses,
yung
positions. Yeah.
number of positions in
Number of
government.
positions.
Number of positions in government, yeah. Kailangan malaman natin yan. Tapos itingnan natin yung supply ng nurses. Pag mag-match yan, walang problema.
Okay. Sige, teka, we're almost out of time. Yung plum question mo, hindi ka na...
Oo nga
Ikaw naman susunod na Secretary of Health. Ayan. I had to master a whole hour to ask you this.
Well, you know, I am deeply flattered with that statement, but to give you the truthful answer, I have not spoken to anybody in Malacanang or the president. I was just focused on giving a healthcare leadership in the country.
No feelers at all?
Yeah.
Ma'am, honestly, I'll be truthful to you guys. Hindi ko po kami nag-uusap ni Presidente tungkol dito. But of course...
GMA, did GMA talk to you about this?
No, sir. Of course, there's a saying, the word says, many plants are planted in man's heart, but the purpose of God still prevails. So hanggang doon lang po ako ngayon. Oo.
Amen na lang ako dyan.
Okay. We'd like, of course, to thank Dr. Maria Minerva Kalimag of the University of Santo Tomas.
Thank you,
and
Doctor.
Salamat po, ma'am.
Congressman Anthony Rolando Goles Jr.
Maraming salamat.
Thank
God
you.
bless po.
And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
And I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez. We are One News, all sides, all the time.